So yeah, for a year we persisted in that delusion until, yeah, until we finally rented Mega Man 2, and oh, it's Airman, and that name is not as nearly as much fun as Radioactive Man. Now, I have more kind of gripey reasons why I like Mega Man 3 better than 2, and one of them is the Metal Blade. You see the weapon I'm using here is called the Metal Blade. It's by far the best weapon in this game. It's probably the best weapon in any Mega Man game ever. You can fire a million shots of it before you run out. I was supposed to do Crash Band's level first, wasn't I? Oh, goodness. Alright, we're off script. But yeah, Metal Blade is the best weapon in this game. You can fire it in multiple directions. You get like a million shots per meter. Like, half of the bosses in the game are weak against it. And it's just so good. And to me, that detracts a little bit from the Mega Man experience, to have a weapon that's that good. The idea is you're supposed to have, like, situational weapons. All the weapons should be good in their own way, but no one weapon should overshadow everything else. And I kind of feel like the Metal Blade overshadows everything else in the game. I'm still going to abuse it, for the same reason that I abused the pause trick in Mega Man 1. I'm still going to use the hell out of Metal Blade, but I don't have to like it. They fixed this, actually. In Mega Man 3, there's a similar weapon called the Shadow Blade that you can fire in multiple directions. It works pretty much the same, but it's shorter range, and you get fewer shots per health bar. Per energy bar, rather. And the Shadow Blade, to me, is a much better balanced weapon. Because it's situationally useful. Still one of the best weapons in Mega Man 3, but only situationally so. Instead of wanting to use it constantly all the time and against every boss, there's only a couple screens in the game where it's really useful. Goodbye, Flashman. Oh, by the way, this is ice physics all through this level, but it basically just feels like all the physics in Mega Man 1, essentially. Can I get to the fridge and back before this weapon screen is over? Because I don't have a Pepsi to drink. I'll run. I'll be fast, kids! Oh, yes! I made it back in time. Okay, as I was sprinting to the kitchen, I stepped on my dog and he was like, "Arf!" Hopefully the microphone didn't pick that up, because then I would get arrested for animal cruelty on YouTube. Okay, thank goodness Mega Man 3 has, or Mega Man 2 has really long weapon get screens. So, I mentioned at the beginning of Mega Man 2, there's a couple screens in the game that even modern players consider to be a little unfair. And one of those screens is coming up here in Quickman's level. This is one of the first things in video gaming that I can remember sitting down and practicing for hours until I got it. A lot of times I don't bother doing that in games, or at least I didn't as a kid. But this one thing, for some reason, it was stuck in my craw, and I just had to learn the laser beams in Quickman's level. I think it took me... It had to have taken me a couple of hours over the course of probably an entire week. Every day after school, I'd come home, I'd watch Batman the Animated Series, and I'd practice this level. So now, it's just so ingrained in my muscle memory, I can just do it. And it's just not even a thing. I just got it. But I did. I would come home. I had to do the dishes with no dishwasher because we didn't have a dishwasher. What? Watch Batman the Animated Series at 4 p.m. and then plug in Mega Man 2. And I remember my brother, like, we had to take turns on the Nintendo. Like, we didn't get to, why did I jump into that? That was dumb. We only had one Nintendo and one TV, obviously. I mean, we didn't have a dishwasher. We're not going to have multiple TVs. And we'd get into lots of arguments and fights over whose turn it was on the Nintendo. And usually the rule was, if you died, you had to hand the controller over. If you died, you had to give the other guy a turn. And so it was really hard to practice this with that rule in place, because this is the kind of thing... I was really supposed to do Crash Man first. I even said as much, didn't I? That's alright, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Yeah, really hard to practice with that rule in place, because this level, to practice, you kind of have to throw yourself at it over and over and over, and learn from each death. As a kid, I didn't really internalize that concept. I had like an idea that I just needed to be at it constantly to really practice it, and that my brother kept crying for the Nintendo wasn't doing me any favors. So I think what I actually ended up doing, we had to do Crash Man. We gotta get Crash Man out the way. We needed his weapon in Flash Man's level, we needed his weapon against Quick Man. It was time. But all I knew as a kid was that it was really frustrating because I myself didn't really understand, like, the mechanics of practicing something over and over and over again until you were good at it. And I couldn't, like, convey that information to my parents at the time either. So, I think what I ended up doing was, during the week, Sunday through Thursday, we had very strictly enforced bedtime. At the time, I think it was 8 p.m. No, it was 9 p.m. because we used to stay up and watch... We were allowed to stay up and watch, like, The Simpsons and Roseanne and other sitcoms we liked. But we weren't able to play Nintendo after my mom got home from work, after, like, usually about 6 p.m. So we got home from school, like, 2:30. There was a bunch of cartoons we wanted to watch. Never missed Batman. Had to watch Batman all the time. But yeah, usually only left us a couple hours a day for Nintendo. And we played a lot of Mega Man going back and forth, trading off like that. We liked Mario a lot because it was a two-player game. We didn't have to worry about switching off. One of us played Mario, one of us played Luigi. Remember we played a lot of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for a while. Neither of us got very good at it. But anyway, but Friday and Saturday nights, we were allowed to stay up as late as we wanted, because we didn't have school the next day. It was, like, a thing, right? And usually my parents would go out. At the time, my stepfather... Was he my stepfather at the time? He wasn't. He was just Mom's boyfriend at the time. So at the time, Mom's boyfriend, who's now my stepfather, but at the time, he was just Mom's boyfriend with the beard, he used to play music. We live in Florida, like, right near... St. Pete Beach, and he used to go down to St. Pete Beach and play music for the tourists, and that's how he made his money at the time. And so my mom would go out Friday nights usually to his gigs, and my brother and I were left home either with a babysitter or just to our own devices, which now kind of sounds like child abuse, but back in the day we didn't think much of it. But the best for me was when my brother would spend the night at a friend's house on, like, a Friday night, and I had the apartment to myself. And that's when I played a lot of games that you couldn't really switch off on. We couldn't really apply the when you die, hand it over rule. I'm certain that's the first time I played Final Fantasy I to completion. Was during those times when I had the house to myself like that. But practicing the Quick Man lasers was another example of that, what I would do during those times. I used to write a lot, too, back in the day. I mean, I still write a lot. I'm still writing all the time. Like, blog posts and video scripts and odd, like, D&D stuff, odds and ends. But back in the day, I used to write, like, short stories and things. And I do a lot of writing when I had the house myself like that. It was just easier to concentrate. I've always been a nighttime person. Ever since I was a kid, I've been a night person. It's just much easier for my brain to function at night. But yeah, looking back, that must have been how I mastered those Quick Man lasers. Was I had the house to myself on a Friday night. A couple years after that, we both got TVs for our Christmas present. We each got like not a great TV, you know, like a really like 1973, something they picked up at a pawn shop for 20 bucks in 1999. No, not quite that late. It was earlier than 99 for sure. What year was it? Let me try to think. Had to been mid-90s. Had to been mid-90s. That's a hole. Is that my first death in Mega Man 2? I think it's my first one. But yeah, at that point, we were able to plug in... Like, we couldn't watch the TVs. Why was I using Metal Blade here? You can't walk while using Metal Blade. Which just makes this section a little trickier. But yeah, we couldn't watch the TVs. We didn't have rabbit ears for the TVs at all. We didn't have cable at the time. All they were good for was plugging Nintendos into, essentially. So that's what we did. I always get hit by that guy. So from that time on, no, it had to have been 96. Because we moved out of the apartment, we moved into that house where me and my brother and I each had our own rooms for the first time. We didn't have to share a bedroom. Yeah, so it had to have been 96. And then Christmas of that year, I got the N64. So yeah, that's correct. That sounds right. We were in the house that year, we each had our own bedrooms, and that year I got the N64. Because at that point, my brother would have already had his Sega Genesis. Yeah, that sounds right. We got the TVs early in that year. We got the SNES and Genesis a little later, and we got the N64 for Christmas. That sounds right. Okay. Sorry, I had to take myself down memory lane for a second just to make sure I knew when we got all our friggin' consoles in the house. Gotta aim this just right. Just so the tip of your blade cleaves through his little dangle-dangle at the top. Anyway, it was through that period of time where I played a lot more. No, we got the TVs in 95. Okay, yeah, TVs and SNES in 95 because... I died there. Because I played Earthbound when it was first released. On that TV, in that bedroom. I didn't have a bed. Let me see if I can unpack that statement a little bit. I didn't have a bed. We lived in this little apartment. The place that I used to watch Batman and then come home and play an hour or Punch-Out or whatever. And when we lived in that apartment... we had a waterbed, my brother and I, that we shared. And then the waterbed got punctured or something, got destroyed or whatever. And my stepdad, who was just Mom's boyfriend at the time, in addition to being a musician, he was also an amateur woodworker. So one year he made us loft beds for the bedroom, so we had more space underneath to play with. And then the beds were like think of bunk beds, except instead of having a bottom bunk and a top bunk, they were both on the top bunk. We had these loft beds. So, for some reason, after we moved out of that apartment, my mom and her boyfriend bought their house together, and for some reason, well, not for some reason, because now we each had our own bedroom, and he didn't want to build the loft beds again. So we just had basically the wooden boxes with the mattresses in them, and set them on the floor of the room. And my brother eventually decided he didn't want that situation. He got a bed from somewhere, but I didn't care. Like, I really didn't care. So, Metal Blade, this is the third boss we've used Metal Blade on that it's been really good against. Such a good weapon. It's good against everything. So the configuration of my bedroom at the time was I had this essentially just a mattress laying on the floor inside this wooden box, and then at the foot of the mattress, I had, like... this industrial crate thing that I had overturned to use as a table to set my giant TV on. And then I had all my consoles hooked up next to it. So I could lay down in my quote-unquote bed and play video games. Or I could throw my beanbag chair on the head of the bed and sit in them and play games like that. So... yeah, 1995 that had to have been, because Earthbound came out in 95. Earthbound came out like right after I got my SNES, and I didn't buy a copy, but my buddy bought a copy and I borrowed his copy and played it through twice. That was 95, and then the next year I got the N64 for Christmas was 96. That sounds right. This is the least interesting commentary ever, just me reminiscing about my own childhood. This is what you guys get! when you, like, badger me for years, play Mega Man this, play Mega Man that, how come you don't play more Mega Man games? Because it makes me feel like I'm 9 years old and I have to go back and relive my childhood and nobody wants to hear it. So I'm sorry. This guy's just gonna run into me up here. We'll just let these guys just take it. That's fine. But yeah, I got that SNES in '95, and later that year, my brother got his Sega Genesis. And what do we play on that Sega Genesis? Like, lots of Sonic games, obviously. Lots of fighting games, too. We had Street Fighter 2. I think we had Mortal Kombat for the Genesis. We had, Oh, I'm cheeseballing with number 2. I'm not doing these platforms. Screw that mess. I learned the Quick Man lasers. You think I'm gonna learn this nonsense? I don't think so. Ain't not gonna happen. Anyway. Fighting games on the Genesis obviously weren't very good because you only had 3 buttons. But then they released a 6-button controller, and they were pretty good after that. Eternal Champions, we played a lot of that. I think he had Virtua Racer for Genesis. Good times. But I had the SNES and the NES in my room, and I never quit playing Mega Man. I always played a lot of Mega Man. Alright, go Heat Man, it's your birthday. Here we go. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Flawless victory. So I've talked quite a lot about my my childhood and whatnot at great length and in pretty embarrassing detail. And haven't talked a lot about Mega Man, really? Sorry. Anyway. I think that was the last of the 8 bosses. I think we're heading on to Wily now. I did them slightly out of order. Usually I do Crash Man a little earlier, I think. I usually do Crash Man right after Airman. Because that's how the boss weaknesses work. Crash Man's weak to Airman. Stupid Wily and his stupid flying saucer. What a jerk. So, there are some parts of the castle levels in Mega Man 2 that are kind of stretching. Like, they're not beyond the pale. But they're getting, like, they're rubbing right up close to the pale. You know what I mean? Shoutouts to Half Frog Man, who sponsored this video, and to everyone who makes this channel possible by supporting me on Patreon.